So it says we're live. Let's go to the Salty Trekker channel. Okay, good. It does show that I'm live. That's good. I was not 100% sure if it was going to work. To be honest. Hey, Bradley. Good to see you. First in the house. I wasn't sure if it was going to work because of my name change, honestly, to Salty Trekker. And this was the first time I had logged out and logged back in to OBS, because yesterday I streamed through OBS on Twitch, and then today I switched back to YouTube. And so whenever you do that in OBS, you have to log out of one and into the other. So fortunately it did in fact work. So, and Julesie's also in the house. Good to see you. You know, funny random thought that I had while we're waiting for people to come in, and we'll see whatever topic happens to come out of this morning's stream. But this is just one of those oddball thoughts that come out of my oddball brain every now and then. Hey, Aberjam. Is, you know, we fight a lot as nerds and fans of these various franchises like Star Trek and Star Wars over canon. We use that word, and we generally use the word completely inappropriately. We tend to argue over canon. What is canon? Is this canon? When most of the time what we're actually talking about is continuity, and because there's no such thing as a canon error. Something is either canon or it is not, and so and that's just determined by whoever the owner of the franchise is. So if CBS, or now the Viacom CBS, says it's canon, period, regardless of whether or not it's in conflict with other canon. But we can fight over continuity, whether or not, like, hey, can phasers fire in a wide beam setting or not? Because in this episode they can, and in this episode they can't, you know, and that kind of thing. But the funny thing to me is that the only canon that really ultimately matters is the canon of the Bible, and that one has been debated for literally thousands of years. I mean, it's still being debated today, just not in an active debate. And instead, the two main camps, as far as the canon of the Bible, there's more than two, but there's two main camps of the canon of the Bible, have simply parted company. So, you have the Catholics, who have, well, there are three really if you count the Jews, because the Jews don't consider what we consider the New Testament section of the Bible, that is the Gospels, the Epistles, and Revelation. They don't consider that canon at all. And of course, the Catholic Church holds a few books canon that the Protestant churches do not. And then you have a handful of churches that are neither Catholic nor Protestant. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not an expert on every denomination of Christianity, so I don't know where they fall as far as which books they consider canon or not. You know, whether some of these churches consider the Apocrypha canon, some do not. And I think that's interesting. That's the only canon that, in my opinion, really matters. Whether or not you consider Star Trek the Animated Series canon to the Star Trek franchise is ultimately meaningless, because to me, when you're talking about an entertainment franchise, here's the thing about that. So I know, for example, good friend to the channel for a long time, a person that I consider my friend, even though we get salty with each other sometimes, we fight sometimes, but Darren Wagner. Now, Darren, I happen to know for a fact, that his absolute favorite episode of Star Trek The Next Generation is Peak Performance. And Peak Performance is an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that came in its second season. And during the second season of Star Trek The Next Generation, those of you that pay attention to that show would know, is when Dr. Pulaski was on the show. So, if CBS or Viacom decided in their infinite wisdom that since Dr. Pulaski was only on the series for that one season, and in season 3 she was unceremoniously removed and Dr. Crusher was brought back with zero explanation, that they simply removed season 2 from canon and went from season 1 to season 3 with no break. Because honestly, if you went from season 1, if the last episode of season 1 to the first episode of season 3 with no break, there would be no issue there, because there's no significant development in season 2 except for maybe Q Who. That would be, I don't think, it was Q season 2, I think it was, that would be a problem. But you could probably get away with inserting Q Who in there, because I don't think Pulaski played a significant role in Q Who. But anyway, you could get away with it. And so, you say, okay, so Peak Performance is no longer considered canon. Does that mean that Darren can no longer enjoy that episode of Star Trek The Next Generation? Of course not. It doesn't impact him at all. It wouldn't make any difference whatsoever, because at the end of the day, it's an entertainment franchise. That's all that it is, and that's all Star Trek ever will be. As much as I love Trek, and Trek is my absolute favorite entertainment franchise, it's been a huge part of my life. And, I got all starstruck when I got to meet William Shatner. It is, in the end of the day, just a TV show, just a movie series. That's it. However, the canon of the Bible, that's important. If you were to, say, remove, and Orville Nation PJ, thank you so much, shows a couple of bucks in, says, good morning, oh great salty one, and thank you so much, my friend. I will, by the way, be streaming pretty much all day this afternoon to try to make up for the fact that I had to cut short my mega stream last week due to the MRI that I was not expecting to have to do. I'm telling you, it's been a rough go. And I'm sorry, PJ, that we have not been able to connect. It's been just, I don't even want to talk about it. This last week has, man, you've been more than understanding, PJ, and I don't deserve to have a friend as good as you. You're a great guy. And let me say this, and PJ did not ask me to do this, even though I'm going to do it anyway. If you're not subscribed to Orville Nation, you should absolutely be subscribed to Orville Nation's channel. PJ gets various, he does all his regular shows as well, but he does get more celebrities on his channel than any other YouTuber I know, and he talks to them without being a jerk, and so which is nice. Because he's not coming at them with an agenda or anything like that. He's just talking to them about, whatever they want to talk about. So you should check out PJ's channel. Anyway, but yeah, so the canonicity of the Bible is actually important, because assuming you believe in it, assuming you are a religious individual, then it should make some kind of impact in your life, what is canon and what is not. So if the Gospels, for example, if the New Testament is not canon, then you would be a Jew, right? Which is very different than if you are a Christian. If the Apocrypha is canon, then you would have some different beliefs. If you, if you believe, and honestly, if you throw out some of the epistles, you might be more inclined to believe as some of the what do they call it, Messianic Christians do, where you think that you should still follow the Jewish practices despite the coming of the Messiah. So there's what is canon in Scripture is very, very important. That's just kind of the random thought of the day that I had. Average says, you can tell me what's canon on screen, but you will never define what's canon in my head. Well, that's fine. But you know what's, but like I said, ultimately it's unimportant. As far as for an entertainment franchise, it's not important. And Orville Nation says, I heard Bill Shatner got starstruck too when he met Anti-Trigger. I did not hear that. And Orville Nation says, no worries, bro. I appreciate it. Dinner Bell says, health comes first, Trekker. Don't worry. Well, I know, but it still sucks. It's not a matter of, I know that I got to do what I got to do, but at the same time, I feel bad when there are things I want to do and I just run into these brick walls sometimes. Excuse me. And I keep, and I even, I sent I wouldn't say a nasty letter, but a rather frustrated letter to my doctor about it, because I'm tired of getting messages from my doctors simply saying, well, we're not sure what's going on at this point, and it's like, if I get one more message saying you're not sure what's going on, it's like, what am I paying you guys for? Seriously, why do I have health insurance? Why am I going to the doctor? Why are you doing all these ridiculously expensive tests if all you can do is sit there and tell me, well, we're not quite sure what's going on? CD says, greetings, how are you today? I am alive, which is definitely better than the alternative. Well, it kind of depends on how you look at it, from a theological perspective. Paul writes, to live is Christ, to die is gain. However, the idea is that as long as I'm on this planet, then that means God's not done with me yet. So it means that I need to continue to figure out what God has got me here to do. And sometimes that's a struggle. It really can be a real struggle to try to figure out, well, what is the point? Why am I here? And I don't know the answer to that. Aberdam says, you think you've had it rough. I had nightmares all last night thanks to your latest creation. Well, you're welcome. And for those of you that don't know, we'll just say it involves Laura Reloaded's belly button and Life with Matthew's face. True story. Dinner Bells, I'm sorry, I missed it. Dinner Bells says, health comes first, Trekker, don't worry. Thank you, Dinner Bells. And Aberdam says, you say it's not important, I say Crystal Skull. Well, the funny thing about it, when there's a serious misstep in a franchise, like, for example, Star Trek V, we'll say Star Trek V is the Crystal Skull of the Star Trek franchise, right? Because we're going to assume that Indiana Jones and the Walker of Doom, or whatever they're calling the next one, is going to be better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And if that's, Star Trek V, even to this day, lots and lots of Trek fans are constantly trying to come up with excuses for how it fits in canon in some kind of way, usually in some humorous way, and I know the most common one that people like to use is that it's a fever dream, right? That basically Kirk, Spock, and McCoy Like they're at Yosemite National Forest and doing their little campfire thing, and that maybe Spock had some tainted marshmallows, and as they fall asleep after seeing row, row, row your boat, Kirk has a fever dream, and that's the rest of the movie. Now, that's one way to look at it. It's a humorous way to look at it. I tend to look at it as it's a bad movie. Um, and but that's just how I tend to. Yeah, I don't try to sit there and reconcile it with the rest of canon because to me it's not worth it. I just discard it. I say that movie is crap. It's the same thing with bad episodes of the shows. I don't try to reconcile The Way to Eden with the rest of the original series. I just don't watch that episode. Now, there's a difference between that and, for example, when we're looking at the Bible and we get to a verse that we may not particularly like, right? Well, if there's a verse we don't particularly like, well, that's too bad. We got to deal with that. And the important thing is not to try and come up with mental gymnastics to make it mean what we want. And that's what's very, very important from a theological perspective. Is that, and we need to be doing the opposite of what we've been doing with our entertainment franchises. In our entertainment franchises, we try to bend what we're seeing to kind of fit a narrative that makes sense to us. What we need to do from a theological perspective is to get a deeper meaning of what we're looking at, what it's actually trying to tell us, so that we can get a deeper meaning of what the text is and conform ourselves to it. And not gonna lie, that can be very difficult sometimes when it says something that is not conforming to social norms. That's difficult because you have the whole world trying to tell you that what that book is telling you is wrong. So what do? Do you say, and look around? A lot of churches at this point are saying, you know what? You're right. That part of the book I think is wrong. It was just talking about how things were back then. So we're just going to ignore that part. I'm sure God was just kidding about that, And so we end up changing that little bit there and that little bit there so that we can be a little more in line with our modern conventions because we don't want to offend anybody. Andy Tiger says Indiana Jones and the Search for Dignity. I still think it's the Walker of Doom, but we'll see. I don't think they've announced the official title yet. What are Baptist church beliefs? I have like 12 of them within a mile of my house. I'm not sure all of the Baptist church beliefs. I'm not a Baptist. I go to a non-denominational church myself. But they're a fairly mainstream church. And there are variances within each church. But what I would do, Bradley, if you're looking for a church, go there and talk to the pastor. Say, hey, what do you believe? And ask them about the tough questions. Ask them about straight up, like, do you think, where I would go straight for the jugular. Ask them about, is homosexuality a sin? And then I would go so far as to say, is the desire of homosexuality a sin? Or is the action of homosexuality a sin? And is there a difference? That would make the answer to that question will make a huge difference in my book. But Baptists, you know, I generally, like I said, I think they're a fairly mainstream church. I don't think that they're way out there, but there are Baptists that are also, you know, like every denomination, there are extreme groups. Like the Westboro, and by the way, the Westboro Baptist Church is not a Baptist church, just so you know. And Aberdash says Baptist churches are generally theologically sound. The common misconceptions they believe about baptism is required for salvation. They don't believe it. Well, if I remember correctly, and maybe you know more than I do, Aberjam, but I think they're called Baptists because they believe in baptismal immersion, which I agree with. Meaning that to be baptized. Oh, and you're right. Thank you, Aberjam. Now that I've been streaming for freaking 20 minutes, you remind me to switch to live chat. But I just did. Baptism should be baptize. The word baptize literally means immersion, and so I do agree that to baptize means to immerse someone. It does not mean to sprinkle water over their head like the Catholics tend to, and the Methodists tend to, and a lot of other churches do. But that being said, I also believe that baptism is something that you do given whatever opportunity you have, which means that if you are, if somebody is a newfound Christian and the only source of water you have around is a puddle, then you sprinkle some water on them. That's perfectly okay. But if you can, you baptize them in a body of water. You immerse them. Because the whole point of baptism is to bury them and to raise them up. It's a symbolic gesture of the death and resurrection. But the problem is where you get into baptismal regeneration, which is something like the International Church of Christ believes in, which is the idea that you are not saved unless you are baptized, no matter what. So, and that kind of thinking, I think, is just wrong. They believe that it is literally magical, the baptism, that it is the water itself saves you. And that's a load of crap. However, depending on where you live, Baptist churches are like McDonald's. They pop up everywhere. And Moxley says, I feel like I'm being ignored. So, no, definitely not ignoring you, Moxley. I think that it was just because of the top chat, live chat thing, so I apologize. And now I say, good morning. How you doing, Moxley? And, yeah, definitely not intentional. I don't understand. Yeah, and this is something I've complained about a million times, is that I keep, is why doesn't YouTube have an option to make it so that live chat is the default chat? I hate it. And I can say that. I don't mind hating things. I just don't believe in hating people. Alex says, and also, how does it determine what is top chat and live chat? Like, why doesn't it put Moxley as top chat? Just because he doesn't have a wrench? It does, but... And Alex has arrived. Good to see you, Alex. Indy Tiger says, Abercrombie Bradley is a Baptist church I grew up in. Did believe that baptism is required for salvation. Did they? Well, that might have been the pastor's opinion, but I know that the churches, the Baptist convention, the Baptist church, the official position is not in baptismal regeneration. Aberdash says, sorry, Mike, you're right. My fault. See, you do need a caregiver. Indeed, I do. Well, I thought the sprinkling of the water was symbolic since it was not really practical to bring the congregation down to the riverside anymore. Well, Stanley, you don't need to bring the congregation to a riverside because you know what is practical? A tub of water. We have a tub of water, it's really practical. A big tub of water. You can get a Home Depot. You can get a big old tub. And, they have these amazing things called hoses. Bradley says, every Baptist church I've been to has been different. That's why I asked. That's the problem. Baptist churches cover a wide variety. And that's why I would actually ask the Baptist pastor specifically. Are there any good rapture films, rapture-based films you'd recommend? No. That's my honest opinion. um, any non-Baptist churches that believe that's not related to the Baptist? Let's see. And Moxley says, I'm well, I'm glad to hear it. CD says, I'm down in the Church of England, Methodist, Baptist, Catholics, and Holy Joes. So not what Holy Joes are, or do you mean Jehovah's Witnesses? Valor says, man at a bar sits by his friend and goes, did you hear about the Korogan cheese factory that exploded? Debris everywhere. Indy Tiger says, Bradley, there are a few different denominations of Baptists. Well, yeah, there's like the Southern Baptist. There actually is such a thing as a Southern Baptist church, as opposed to, and there's like the Congregational Baptist Church. And so, yeah, so there are variations within Baptist church. But you know what? It honestly, and this is something that I know a lot of people feel weird about. But if you're looking for a church, and you absolutely should do this, don't start out by showing up at the church on Sunday morning, and and going to the service. Because if the pastor is good at speaking and the music is good, you're going to be like, okay, this is a good church, right? But you can be fooled by that, right? What you should do is call the church on Monday, assuming, or check with their office hours. Some churches are closed on like Mondays and Tuesdays. That's when they take their days off or whatever. But look what their office hours are. And then call them whenever their office is open. Schedule an appointment with the pastor. Sit down with them and say, all right, I'm thinking about attending your church. Tell me what you believe. Don't tell me to go to your website. Don't tell me what your what your denomination believes. I want to talk to you, the senior pastor of the church. You tell me what you believe. If you don't have time for me, then you don't want me. And I'm sorry because, I know that there are big churches where the senior pastor, if you have a church of 10,000 people, then the senior pastor may not be able to meet with every prospective new person. But you know what? One of his associate pastors will. And so, that there will be, and if an associate pastor can't sit down and say, well, this is what we believe with absolute certitude, there's a problem. And I know for a fact that if you came to our church and you walked into our office and you said, I want to talk to one of your pastors about what you guys believe, that our church secretary would set you up with an appointment within a week. And you'd probably end up talking to Pastor Mike, and he would sit, and not me, but a different Mike, and he would sit down with you. There's also Greg. He might sit down with you, and there's a couple of other associate pastors at our church. Corey, our senior pastor, because our church has got about 5,000 members, so I know Corey, unfortunately, very rarely is able to sit down with people anymore, but they would be able to say, no, this is our core beliefs. This is what we believe. We believe in baptism by immersion. We believe in expository teaching of the Word. We do believe that that the Word is the infallible Word of God. When we say that, we believe that the original manuscripts are the perfect and infallible Word of God, but that the modern translations are just that. They are translations. Stuff like that, so and we'll talk about that. Anyway, back to the chat. Baptist church close to my house, like 100 years old, and they shove Jesus at you like it's a requirement to live, and if you argue with them, they act like you're insane. Well, I don't know what you mean, they shove Jesus at you like it's a requirement to live. you could make the argument that um, you're not. I mean, because there's the argument that you're spiritually dead without Jesus, and so that's something that is a common religious term. But yeah, so I'm not even sure what that means. Dear Salty Tricker, did you also find Touched by an Angel to be far too schmaltzy? Well, I'm not sure if I follow what you mean by schmaltzy. I thought the show was fun, but it was very bad theology. The idea of baptism is required for salvation comes from unless you are born of water and of the Spirit, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. But Jesus then explains that which is flesh, and that which is spirit. Well, the funny thing about that, though, Aberjam, is that it says that which is born of water and of the Spirit. A lot of people act like, well, that they don't. A lot of people don't understand that passage because a lot of people don't understand what being born of water even means. So, they think that somehow that means like being dunked in a tub. They're talking about literal birth because like when women give birth that they break their water, and that when you are reborn, when you give yourself to God, you're being reborn in the Spirit. That has nothing to do with being baptized directly. However, you are then, he does say that you should go and be baptized. He does, and it's kind of interesting. The whole thing about baptism, I think, is just stupid. On the one hand, you have people that say, well, do I have to be baptized? Which I think is a stupid question. Because, hey, if Jesus says go get baptized, why would you say, do I have to? Just say, okay, and go get baptized. The end. And so that doesn't seem that hard. However, there's also nothing that says, and salvation is not an event. I think that's the big problem. People want to make salvation into this event. Salvation is a process, and I think that's where I know some people disagree with this, but I don't think that salvation is just like because there are some Christians that believe you get on your knees, you say a magic prayer, and you're saved, right? And the sinner's prayer, so to speak. You say something to the effect of, Lord, I'm a sinner, please come into my heart and fix me and take over and blah, blah, blah. There you go. See, now you're saved, and God has forgiven all your sins, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that's not quite how salvation works. So I got to take my pile of pills here. Pills. Breakfast of champions. But salvation is a process. Part of that process is baptism. Part of that process is developing a prayer life. Part of that process is just going through life, is becoming a disciple of someone, is discipling others. Part of that process is just learning to deal with life and learning to depend on God. And part of that process is just living. And once you're done with that process, you're dead. Trasha says, Solid Checker, would it be fair to say that non-denominational church comes with less baggage? I've always wondered. In some ways, yes, because non-denominational churches, the advantage they have is that they don't come with the requirements that some denominations throw on their churches. Because now they also come without the support of a denomination. So, for example, the Methodist Church, which is the church I grew up in, has the huge advantage of a very organized structure They're a huge denomination. The Methodists have a virtually unlimited finances, and so if they want to put a church in your town, they can snap their fingers, write a check, put the building up, put a pastor there, and if 3 people show up for church on Sunday, no big deal, they got the money, right? That's the big advantage to the Methodist Church, is that their resources are virtually unlimited. Same with the Catholics, same with the Baptists. These churches have a huge pool of resources. The downside is that as a Methodist pastor, or they actually call themselves ministers or reverends. So if you are, a minister and a reverend in a Methodist church, you must teach exactly the way that they tell you to teach. And in fact, the Methodists are called Methodists because they have a very specific method, not only to what they teach, but how they teach it. And so you have zero flexibility as to what you teach and how you teach it. And so there is no room for you as a Methodist pastor, reverend, or minister, or whatever you want to call yourself, to insert your own humanity. Now, the Methodists have their own also theological problems that I'm not going to get into right now. I think the church is crumbling because of that. And the Methodist Church is about to split into 2 over the issue of homosexuality. But the Methodist Church, but denominations have that. The advantage to a strong denomination is generally resources and organization. The disadvantage is the fact that there's no flexibility, and that if a pastor thinks something differently than the denomination, then either the pastor is ostracized or that church is disowned by the denomination. So with an independent church like the Experience Community Church where I attend, we are not owned by a denomination. We were founded independently. We were never associated with a denomination. So we can do whatever the heck we want. The disadvantage to that is we live and die by our own finances. And so if we're struggling, guess what? There ain't no denomination to help us. There are also love pastors, fire and brimstone pastors, live your life, Christ pastors, etc. Oh, well, yeah, there's a huge variation in the style of different pastors. Viv and I have been talking about it, and it seems like I wasn't the only one forced to be baptized. It was one of many reasons she didn't want to be part of the Mormon Church, or any for that matter. Well, the Mormons, most Christians don't even consider the Mormons Christians, to be honest with you. But the Mormons are kind of an oddball case. That which is dead cannot be killed. Sorry, I think that was Game of Thrones. Yeah, I don't think that's a Christian reference. Born of water refers to amniotic fluid. Yes, yep. Oh, wow, me and Aberjam agree on something. There's first time for everything. Valor says, what about all the other Gospels were rejected when they were created the original canon Bible? Who does really say what truly the Word of God? Well, first of all, Valor, those are, for the most part, completely and utterly laughable. I love the fact that people say, oh, all these other Gospels that were rejected. Have you read them? Because try reading some of these other Gospels, and you know what? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out why they were rejected from the canon of the Bible. If you actually try to take them seriously, you're an idiot. I mean, there's actually, I think it's, I can't remember if it's the Gospel of Thomas. I think it's in the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus is like, as a kid, running around killing people. Trust me, it's laughable, some of these Gospels. And you can tell that they were written to try and defame Christianity in the early days. Nobody takes them seriously. And so and don't forget to put at Salty Trekker in there because I can't read everything because I'm so I get so far behind sometimes. I'm trying to do the best I can. Bradley says, I've been kicked out of churches and told never to return because I asked too many questions. Well, I will tell you this, Bradley. If you're kicked out of a church for asking too many questions, then that's a church I wouldn't want to go to anyway. Because a church should be encouraging you to ask questions. Unless, and I will be fair, I don't know what kind of questions you were asking. If you were asking loaded questions, like the kind of questions that you find on some of these atheist websites that are obviously questions written by people that don't know what they're talking about, or they're designed to be basically F you kind of questions, that's different. But if you're asking genuine, honest questions about, hey, what am I supposed to do here? What does this mean? What does this mean? And they're just saying, get out. Then that makes no sense. And if they want to kick you out because you're asking genuine questions, then why would you want to be there? And Aberdam says, baptized doesn't mean dunked in water, it means immersed. Well, that's what I said earlier. Baptized, practically anything is why the Bible makes distinctions about. Well, and that's something that I've talked about before, Aberdam, not on this stream, but just in conversation. The interesting thing about baptized is since the word actually simply means immersion, the word baptize means to immerse. I think that it's interesting because when we talk about terms like to be baptized in the Holy Spirit, doesn't mean anything other than to be immersed in the Spirit of God, to be completely surrounded and immersed in God's Spirit. That's all it means. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're speaking in tongues, which I know some churches think that's what it means. But yeah. Aren't you supposed to crush them up first? I must have missed something there, Stan. And yeah, agreed. Average Avenue Church worth their salt, and of course, being the Salty Trekker, very much worth into being worth your salt. Should encourage questions, not discourage them. Valor says baptism should be a choice given to people, not forced on them. Well, yeah, forced baptism is meaningless. And that is important to note, is that there are churches, the Catholic Church being one, and the biggest one. The Catholic Church believes heavily in infantile baptism. I think infantile baptism is blasphemous, to be honest. And, I think the Methodist Church moved away from that. So the Methodist Church used to do infantile baptism, and now they just do infantile dedication, where they will do the water sprinkling, but they don't call it baptism. They call it a dedication ceremony. Because baptism must be a free will decision. You have to choose with full knowledge and understanding of what you are choosing. You must choose to be baptized. If you do not choose to be baptized, then it is completely and utterly meaningless. You might as well just be taking a bath. It means nothing. And so it just means that somebody put some water on your head or dunked you in some water or whatever. It's absolutely meaningless without your making the conscious choice. So if somebody baptizes you as an infant, there's no difference between that and them just sticking you in the sink and washing you. The only difference is they dressed up in some fancy clothes to do it. Robert says, good morning. How you doing, Robert? Aberdam says, well, you can ask whatever questions you like. We're all insane. Yeah, we are all insane here. That's true. And Aberjam is never shy to share his opinions on these church live streams. So I will say that while Aberjam and I differ in opinions on a lot of stuff, even a lot of theological stuff. I don't mind him sharing his opinions on this stuff, because even though we do differ in opinions on some key issues, I don't think he's a dummy when it comes to this stuff. We just differ on a few things, and if it's something major, I would, I would make sure that I point it out, because like if Averjam was saying something stupid, then yeah, I'm going to yell at him for it. Valor says, Thomas Potts has his own gospel? Wow, who knew? Well, no, it's not the gospel of Thomas Potts, just to be clear. It's just the gospel of Thomas, and it is a joke. Bradley says, if you could go back in time and meet Jesus, would you, and what would your first question to him be? Well, first of all, I would love to, if I could also have a perfect understanding of Aramaic and or Hebrew. Because obviously going back and only speaking English wouldn't do me a whole lot of good. However, good question. And honestly, I would ask him for clarification on sexual morality, because there's so much division on that in the 21st century. So I would ask him for clarification on that, because even though I think that Paul writes on it fairly extensively, Jesus doesn't address it directly. So I would like to hear it directly out of his mouth. And so that would be my first question to him. I would ask him, I would say, Rabbi, can you please clarify what it means to be a sexually pure person? Now, the problem is, knowing Jesus the way he is, he would probably say something, you already know the answer to that question, or something, or say, sexual purity is like a field that has yet to be plowed, or something like that. Just the way that he tends to speak. But that would probably be where I would start. Abraham says there are two options. The Bible is just a bunch of man-made scribblings. In that case, it doesn't really matter. Or the Bible is in fact inspired by God, in which case he does state in his pages he wrote it, and is decided what is and isn't official. Let's see. What was that? Valor? You were answering something that Valor said. Oh, you're talking about, but who says that's the case? All we know is a bunch of old farts pick and chose what went into it. I think that let me say this about picking and choosing what a bunch of old farts picked and chose what went into it is a gross oversimplification of the canonization of the Bible. I know that a lot of people want to say that because it's a nice derogatory way to try and put it. But like I said, if you look at the so-called rejected books of the Bible, it's a joke. Like I said, the so-called rejected Gospels are things like, Jesus was a serial killer, and things that basically say that, oh yeah, Jesus said it's perfectly okay to go out and do all sorts of things that obviously Jesus wouldn't say. Things that directly conflict with other things in the Bible. And that's part of the reason for the canonization, was that there were you had these books that were written by people like Paul. You had the letters of Paul, you had the gospel accounts going around, but then you had these counterfeit gospels that were being spread around, and so people were the church was getting concerned because these counterfeit gospels were being spread around that were teaching people to do things that were wrong. And so they said, you know what we need to do? We need to assemble an official set of books that are approved by the church. And so they gathered together all the books and letters that they could, and then they sorted through, and they said, these are the ones that we can verify are authentic. Now, the Old Testament stuff, that was easy. That had been canonized for a long time. But as far as the New Testament, they said, okay, these 4 gospel accounts, we know that these 4 gospel accounts are authentic. These stories about Jesus killing people when he was a kid, yeah, I think we can discount those. These stories about Jesus telling everybody that it's okay to sleep around and do all, yeah, I think we can throw that out. All these random sayings that don't make much sense, yeah, we can throw all the Gnostic crap that is literally random nonsense, yeah, we can throw that stuff out. All right, so now let's go to the epistles. All right, these are confirmed writings of Paul. We can take those, and then we can, and so once they got that together, here you go. There's our canonization. And if it's not a part of this canon, then sorry, we're not interested. And I don't have a problem with that, because we want to make sure that we're not putting stuff in there that we can't confirm. Now, is it possible that there are legit writings of Paul, that there are legit writings of other disciples that are not in the Bible? Absolutely. In fact, I would guarantee you that there are writings of Paul and other disciples that did not make it into the canon of the Bible. But that wasn't the point of canonization. The point of the canonization was not to include everything that Paul ever wrote. The point of it was to make sure that nothing that was written by a counterfeit was included. If that makes any sense. Hopefully that makes some kind of sense. And so I understand that to some people, canonization is just a bunch of old people randomly picking stuff. And that to some people, religion is just some way of controlling people. And, in some, and I'll say this, the church does sometimes try to use the belief that people have to control people. Absolutely. People do it today. But you know what else people do to use that today? Anything else that's ideologically based. Like the Democrats, the Republicans, every religion, atheists, the Phantom Menace, the SJWs, every ideologically based group uses their ideology to control people, without exception. Every single one of them. They use their ideology to control people. They try to use their ideology to influence people. And that's why I've labeled myself an anti-ideologist, because I don't like the idea that all these different groups are simply trying to manipulate people. And, but everybody wants to suggest that this group is worse than this group because this group is a group I disagree with. Whatever. Let's see. Valor says, I'm confused about didn't Jesus become sacrificed? Didn't Jesus become sacrificed to cleanse us all of the sins we never committed? Yet babies or children are baptized. Did he die in vain then? And yes, Aberjam, I'm using the cow mug just for you, buddy. That's why I have it here today. There's even a little chip in the mug. I'm really mad. I don't know where that chip came from, but I'm still using the cow mug just for you. Wait. I'm a little confused. Maybe I need a little clarification, Valor. And why didn't Salty Trekker highlight? I'm not sure why it didn't. That's weird. I am logged in, right? Did you spell it right? Let's say, maybe, that's weird. Anyway, what I'm confused about is, didn't Jesus become a sacrifice to cleanse us all of the sins we never committed? Yet babies or children are baptized, did he die in vain then? Well, first of all, are you trying to... Babies, our children, are baptized. I assume you're trying to suggest something to the effect of, if babies are cleansed at baptism, and Jesus was sacrificed to cleanse us of all these sins, but babies are cleansed of their sins when they're baptized, so that Jesus die in vain because the babies won't ever commit any sins, you're missing the entire point of baptism, because baptism doesn't mean you'll never sin. So I think you're completely missing the point of baptism, Valor. That might be it. So maybe that's it. So baptism is an external sign of your commitment to Christ. It doesn't mean that you will never again sin. It doesn't mean that you no longer need a savior or anything like that. And Alex Bogey throws $10 into the pot. Thank you so much, Alex. I truly appreciate it. Says, here. I always argued that socialism was religion without being called a religion. This is obvious when they make a cult of personality posters like Stalin or Castro or G. Floyd. Well, let me say this, and thank you for the $10. I appreciate it. I don't think that socialism is a religion without being called a religion. I'll disagree with your premise there. But I will say this. Socialism and religion are both ideologically driven for the most part. Now, there is a difference between religion and, I know that it's an old buzz term that Christians sometimes use, but it's true. Christianity at its purest form is about having a relationship with the divine as opposed to a true religion. A religion is, of course, a set of edicts and rituals, as opposed to having an actual relationship with God. But a religion, like when we talk about a actual religion, like a structured religion, like the Catholic Church or a Methodist Church or a Baptist Church or whatever, a religion like socialism is ideologically driven. And all ideologies are designed to drive people towards certain behaviors. All ideologies are designed to drive people towards certain behaviors. And that includes socialism, capitalism, communism, and yes, Methodism, Catholicism, Judaism, you name it. Atheism, sorry, not sorry. All the isms. And these various groups, what they tend to do, and this is the irony of it to me, is they all point the finger at the other groups and say how they're trying to control you. And what we see in politics all the time. The Republicans point the finger at the Democrats and say how the Democrats are trying to control you, while the Democrats are pointing the fingers at the Republicans and saying how they're trying to control you. The fact is, they're both trying to control you. The atheists are always trying to point the finger at the Christians and saying how the Christians are trying to control you, while the atheists are also trying to control you. And so it's all ideologically based groups are in some way, shape, or form trying to control you. And so there are no exceptions, which I do not like. Sorry, I need to check, make sure that text wasn't particularly important. No, it was not. Have you heard about George Floyd Memorial destroyed by lightning? We know who controls the weather. Well, I don't think that it was struck by lightning by God, Robert. I think it was just struck by lightning. I mean, if you're trying to say that somehow George Floyd, I think either that was a joke in very bad taste, or I think that people who think that that was genuinely a sign from God are really off. Um, let's see. Christianity has been pacifist since Christ walked the earth. Any Christian war since has been against the teachings of Christ and twisting the Bible by power-hungry scumbags. I tend to agree with you on that, but and that's the problem. That's where you can see the difference between the ideology of various churches versus the relationship with God argument that I was making earlier. If you have a relationship with God, you know what you're not doing? Trying to start a war with someone. And in fact, yeah, and like if you look at like the Mennonites, people like John DeMarco, he's a total pacifist. But but instead, we have people who, in the name of God, they want to start a war. How does that make any sense? Did you not read the Bible? And so, but yeah. To be baptized in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ is to be put on the official Holy Ghost merch wear. Okay. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. I just not sure what you're even saying there, Steve. Did anybody yet see the Luke Skywalker Grogu poster? I have not. I did not know that there was a Luke Skywalker Grogu poster. But I do like me that Luke Skywalker and Grogu moment from Mandalorian Season 2. One of the best nerd moments of all time. And he says, as an atheist, I don't like the militant atheists that look down on religion. You do you. But you see, that's the problem, though, Indy, and we need... Just like we need more Christians that are willing to speak out against the ideological Christians, we need more atheists that are willing to speak out against the ideological atheists. Because when we look at at people like Richard Dawkins, like the late Christopher Hitchens, and of course most of the atheists that we find on YouTube and other online resources, we're not finding atheists that are just like, oh, I just don't happen to believe, and you can do whatever you want. That's not what atheism is, unfortunately, Indy. I mean, I know that's you for the most part. I've never had a problem with you. You and I have never really bumped heads about that kind of stuff. And that's perfectly fine. We can be friends and disagree on the existence of God, and that's perfectly okay. But instead, what we have online is, people like Thunderfoot or Aaron Raw, or other people that want to sit there and say, oh, Christians are inherently destructive or horrible people, or superstitious or whatever. Anti-science, we get that a lot. And meanwhile, you have Christians that will say atheists are evil, that they're immoral, that they're, all these horrible things. And the fact is, Christians and atheists disagree on one main topic, the existence of God, and the legitimacy of the authority of the Bible. And so when we can talk about the existence of God, and we can even argue about it, but we need to be able to argue about it from a position that's not charged with the emotion of hate. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening anywhere. And that's what really drives me crazy. Is like I would absolutely love to be able to find an atheist, an intelligent, educated atheist. And I'm not saying that most atheists aren't intelligent or educated. Most atheists are intelligent and educated. But where they fail is that they are charged with pure, unadulterated hatred towards religion. Those that want to have the debate in order to show how stupid the Christian is. They want to have the debate to show um, how the Christians are these horrible people, how the Christians are these people who um, are they don't believe in science, that they don't believe in logic, that they don't believe in any kind of in any type of intellectual pursuit and all that. And what I want to find is an atheist that wants to have the hardcore, let's have the knockdown, drag out fight. And I mean, we'll fight, but we'll fight with a tone of respect. Not, and I mean, we could yell at each other. And you know, you guys have seen me do it sometimes, and some of you that have known me from the beginning of this channel, you may have seen me back in the day when I would fight and scream, and hopefully, I'm really hoping to revitalize some of this. And like on Tuesday, me and Lore Reloaded are starting back up with a joint live stream. And yes, Dr. Alex, this is the new permanent name. I think Salty Trekker tends to fit my personality a little better, don't you? I'm not an anti-Trekker, I'm a salty Trekker. I think that fits me a little better. But let me. But I would love to, you know, like what, and I'm hoping that Lore and I can show this, because Lore, if you know Lore Reloaded, Lore tends to fall on what some people would call the more liberal side of the spectrum, the more, we'll say, SJW side of the spectrum of Trek, right? And so he hangs out with people like Ketwalski, Jesse Gender, that kind of thing. And I'm certainly, you know, and that's fine. And so, and while I tend to lean more Phantom Menace side of things, even though I disagree with the way the Phantom Menace has been behaving, I still tend to agree with their assessment of the way that politics have been inserted into the franchises. And so what I'm truly hoping is that what Lore and I can do, because of our long-standing friendship and our long-standing relationship, is that when we start doing our Tuesday night live streams, that we can show people that we can fight, and I mean really fight, about some of these issues and still be friends. And if we can do that and show people the spirit of argument, the spirit of good-natured fighting, I don't know, maybe we can make a difference. Maybe. It's just a hope. Just a hope. I don't know. We'll see if we can pull it off. I don't know. Let me finish up the chat, then we're going to wrap things up. So my plan today, just so you guys know, is I'm going to try to take a little bit of a nap after I wrap up this live stream, and then do a marathon stream, kind of like I did last Sunday. Hopefully this time Dr. Alex will show up, since he bailed on me last week. You know, not saying anything, but you know, Dr. Alex was supposed to come on last week and didn't, because he's a jerk. And I can't get used to your new avatar. I'm used to it being, you know, that orangey color. Now it's that more pale white, which I guess fits you better since you're so pale and white. Indy Tiger says, yes, that type of atheist does seem to be growing movement. Perhaps their voices are amplified like other ideologies because of the internet. It's a sad trend. Well, I'll tell you, and I've said this last week, but unfortunately the internet, you know what it's done? Is it's radicalized everyone. Because now what people do is they point and click and they select people they agree with, and we create our own echo chambers. And when we do that, we radicalize ourselves. And so I'm kind of purposefully trying to go the opposite trend. I'm trying to listen to people I disagree with more. I'm trying to de-radicalize myself. I'm trying to, and that's why I broke off with the Phantom Menace. To be honest with you, I saw that in myself, and so we need to be careful of that. And it became really obvious when I started realizing that I would look at friends that in the past I had friends that I knew leaned a little left, and all of a sudden they were hard left. I had friends that leaned a little left or a little right, and they were hard right. And it's like my friends that leaned a little right, they were telling me all about how George Floyd was the worst criminal ever, and that everybody in Black Lives Matter was a criminal, and that how Antifa was a terrorist organization and all this. And then all my friends that leaned to the left a little bit, they were telling me about how Black Lives Matter were just a bunch of peaceful protesters, but boy, those Proud Boys, they were just a bunch of terrorists. And let me tell you, every Trump supporter, they just wanted to bring this country down. And so it was just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And all of a sudden I realized what it was. It was like, it's everybody is separating themselves into their own little bubbles, and they're radicalizing themselves by point and clicking and creating their own echo chambers. Everybody's doing it. That's what the internet is doing it. And COVID made it 100 times worse. And if we don't pop your bubble, people, please, for the love of God, pop your bubble. Start listening. And I don't mean just putting it on and going, oh my God, this guy's a jerk. Start listening to people you disagree with. Please, please start listening to people you disagree with, because everybody is becoming radicalized. Everybody is. Sorry. As an atheist, I have no hatred towards Christians as people. I just think they have been sold a lie to keep them under control. And I disagree with that, but I understand why some atheists believe that, because they think that Christianity is a lie that's been sold. I understand certain religions are that, but I would say that atheism is a lie to keep people under control. I suppose anti is a little negative. I agree. Anti is a little negative, and that's why I changed it. Let's see, starting with Steve. Alex says, Laura referred me to you when I asked if there were any conservative Trek channels. Yeah, Laura's a good guy. He's a little nutty, but he's a good guy. Other religions create aberrations in human behavior that would otherwise be considered unacceptable, like all non-insert religious group are animals. Well, George, let me say this. I think that all ideologies do that. Not just, I know we like to, and I remember it was Christopher Hitchens who famously would say all the horrible things that are done in the name of religion and pretend that that's like unique to religion, without stopping to think about the fact that we did that to the Japanese, we did that to the Germans, we did that, in fact, to every group we've ever gone to war with. Every ideology, and in fact, we've done that to the Democrats. We've done that to the Republicans. We did it to the Whigs. We did it to the English. We've done it to the French. We've done it to every group we've ever disagreed with. We turn them into animals. That's what we do. That is literally what we do. Ideologies always literally dehumanize other opposing ideologies. It's not religion. And yet we want to pretend it's one specific group. No, it's ideologies. It's not religion. So, saying spirituality is one thing, religion is another, that is the biggest load of bunk ever, in my opinion. And Dr. Alex says, oops, yeah, yeah, try showing up next time. Also, did he specify short and ugly? And all right, so let me see anything addressed to me here. Advertising anti is negative, salty over brimming with positivity. Well, you know, salty actually, according to what we researched the other day, is a term of endearment for sailors who tell stories of old. So there you go. The few people I follow regularly on YouTube tend to not follow the standard left-right split. Salty Trekker, Mindless Entertainment, Old Media Guy, even Doomcock and Mecha 42. Well, Dr. Alex, I'm just saying that we do have this tendency, especially during COVID. A lot of people have become more extreme in what they do. Love the new name. Hopefully be around more often. I'm now fully recovered and healthy. That's good to hear. I can't wait to have a great conversation. Miss it. Me too, my friend. Me too. You're just spicy now. No, I'm spicy. I'll tell you, spicy. Where is? Oh, don't have it handy. Spicy's coming. Spicy's coming. And so obviously Mrs. Anti-Trekker can't be Mrs. Anti-Trekker anymore. So now she is Pepper Trekker. And I got Darren Wagner to thank for that name. Alright, so I am going to take my nap and then come on later for a very, very long live stream to try and raise more money to hopefully pay my mortgage so I'm not homeless soon. That's unfortunately not a joke. But when I come back on, I do still have plenty of these stupid hot cheese balls. And some more of that Satan's Pleasure chocolate. I'm hoping, I haven't heard back from him yet, but I'm hoping to be able to get Life with Matthew on so we can do some more of that tabletop simulator. Maybe get Dr. Alex on if he doesn't run away again. And if he's free, get Lore Reloaded on at some point. I don't know if Lore threw away the cheese balls he got last week, because I wouldn't blame him if he did. And at Aberjam, I'd have to raise a whole lot of money. If somebody wants to donate $2 million, I will get a boob job. Yeah, I'll say it. $2 million donation, I'll get a boob job. Didn't say I'll keep it, but I'll get it. And I'll choose what style. Alright guys, take care. And that was the weirdest way to end this live stream ever. But remember, you are the salt of the earth. But I am the salty Trekker. Oh, and thanks for the down payment on the boob job. Down payment for the 10 Shatners. By the way, we've Admiral Bro Code. Thank you for the 10 Shatners, but that is the official name of Canadian currency now, is Shatners, in case you care. That's a great way to end the show. 10 Shatners. 10 Shatners to the salty